Yay, we made it to part 3 of our 3-part video series. Thank you so much for joining us again. I'm Helen, this is Tia.
Hi.
As I've said in previous videos, we're doing a 3-part video series on addictions and addiction services. This one today, we're really getting into the nitty details and the world of gambling addictions. If we're able to start, Tia, just with a little bit of a summary, or you had attended a conference, are you able to just share a quick kind of summary of what that was about?
Yeah, absolutely. So the conference that I had attended, it was a research conference, and it was research around the last couple of years in regards to the challenges and trends that I had spoke about earlier around gambling, but specifically looking at kind of like sports betting and the in-play live betting that has now kind of taken over everyone's TVs that we see through advertising, through like celebrity endorsements. A lot of people, celebrities have been being part of these advertising that is on, and they really kind of like started to look into and have some research around, is this risky? Is there harm to being able to do live in play gambling during live sports events? Because before it was just parlay betting, but now you can literally bet on anything in regards to sports gambling. So I know that like one of the examples they had given is you could actually bet on the Kool-Aid color that was going to be poured on a coach at the end of the Super Bowl, right? And so that could be one bet, but then within that you can bet on a whole bunch of things. And so they've been seeing that online gambling has really increased in the last couple of years since they've made these changes.
I think because it sounds like with technology and even with COVID, which I know you'll touch on a little bit later, that we wanted to focus this video series on gambling because for our rural communities, there is, a risk there with being sometimes isolated, with having less, of a crazy big night scene. And, that's not really happening in Okotoks or High River right now, that we want to get this information out to best protect our community out there with the rural communities that we serve. So can you start with telling us who is at risk?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the research and the information that was being provided and shared at the conference, they actually identified that this was for helpline calls to the helpline within 2022 and 23, that there was an increase in the age. Or there was a decrease in the age. So they were saying that the most at risk and that were making the phone calls were males in between the ages of 16 and 33. And this was a change from prior to this year, because it was males still, but in between the ages of 35 and 44. So the age has really gone down in regards to the vulnerabilities and the risks. And they were really trying to say that they feel like maybe like the accessibility to being able to bet or gamble on your phone, and that maybe it had something to do with the sports betting, as well as the social norm and the cultural norms of sports betting right now. A lot is happening when people are getting together with events and all that kind of stuff. And then younger ages were starting to engage in it, specifically males that they were talking about, and advertising. So they were talking a lot about the advertising and how that might be associated with the lower age range that they were seeing now, because there's such people as like NHL celebrity or hockey players and things like that that are actually endorsing these sports betting.
I guess that makes sense. If you can bet on things like, did you say like you can bet on the Kool-Aid color that's poured at on the coach where you pour it? Like you don't even have to know anything about football or about hockey to be able to engage in these. You called them in-play live bets. You can just be someone who wants to connect with other people, who wants to have just something to do if they're bored. You really don't need to know anything about sports to be able to start in-play betting. Wow, that's kind of
Yeah.
scary because that opens up a whole other
Yeah.
demographics who wouldn't have been a part of sports betting in the past.
Yeah. And then people are betting multiple bets throughout live events, and then if they feel like potentially they aren't going to be, they're seeing that maybe that's not going to, I don't know, they're not going to catch a ball or something like that, that they can actually take their bet back and only lose half or a quarter of their money, which then in turn makes people feel like they're winning, which is risky in itself as well. So those kinds of things have been starting to happen that people are starting to look into. Some of the other things that they were showing that who is at risk is they were identifying females that have reported struggles with anxiety. They are at higher risk of problematic gambling, as well as males who are reporting concerns around substance use. So alcohol or substance use, they are at risk of problematic gambling. As well, they were actually saying that females tend to gamble through lottery tickets at first, and that can develop into high risk gambling. And then males are often online. They're doing the online gambling. So some things to kind of consider and to keep in your forefront.
Yeah. I think the idea is that, you can have fun with some of this, and that you can do in-play betting, that you can do lottery tickets, but there's a limit. And there's also some underlying things that can make someone more vulnerable to that turning from a good time and playing and an occasional thing to a dependence, an outlet, a way to cope. If they have some of those, or if they don't have those protective factors, if they have those reasons to make them more vulnerable to gambling, or as you called them in a previous video, processing addictions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you able to speak to what makes somebody vulnerable to process addictions in general, or gambling in general? So
a lot of different things it could be like normalized as someone's growing up. It could be like a social norm, people are doing it around you, or you've actually seen it in your throughout childhood, family members, those kinds of things. Other people are vulnerable. There's a link to being able to emotionally regulate when people are using certain like VLTs or gambling online. It helps with, some people will say that it helps with emotional regulation, trauma, all those kinds of things. So
or isolation or loneliness, which is something that we do see with our clients sometimes. And it can be really hard to supplement gambling with something else that's a little bit more constructive when they are struggling with those things, for sure. And so if, for ourselves or our friends or family are doing things like the occasional, going to the casino or, playing the lottery tickets, or, I know even at, different workplaces, there's work lottery type stuff. What would we look for to say that it's not fun and occasional, but that it's becoming a little bit of a concern? What are some of those things that we can look for?
And I think that's a good point, is that not everyone that's using lottery tickets are susceptible, I can't say the word, to problematic gambling, but it's something to be aware of. That research has shown that. So some of the things that you could see in yourself or even loved ones or anything like that would be people who are exceeding limits around like how often they are gambling, how many hours potentially that they're gambling, if they're spending more money than they desired. Some people might be more preoccupied by gambling, so they're spending their day figuring out how they can gamble, when they can gamble, and a lot of their attention is associated with that. Financial problems is obviously definitely one of them. A conflict within a relationship, often it's because of someone not spending enough time with the family and or financial problems. That could be just a warning sign of something that you might want to have some conversation around. Another one would be loss, like trying to like gain losses. And so like loss chasing would be the word for it, and kind of like trying to get even with losses that you had before. So then that's like you going and potentially someone going into the casinos or spending more time trying to gain those losses.
Right. Yeah. We talked before about how COVID can actually have been a contributing factor to why gaming and the problem of gaming and gambling is such a big issue now. Could you speak to that relationship?
Yeah, they just kind of said during COVID, people started to gamble more often online because all the land-based sites, so such as like the LTs and casinos, were all closed. So people then started to gamble online because of boredom, because of accessibility, because of potentially finances, even because people weren't spending as much money. So that that became something that happened over COVID. They're actually saying that research has now shown that since COVID, the amount of people that are going back to land-based sites are at pre-COVID numbers, but then people are still gambling online, and the numbers are staying quite similar. So, so people are starting to go and use both places. One of the things that they did discuss that after COVID, there was a lot of resources and kind of energy put into advertising social harms and harm reduction online. So when people are online gambling, there's information coming across people's screen around how to limit set, how to potentially self-exclude, virtual helplines that people can be getting a hold of. So there's a lot of information and energy and money that are being put into helping take away the harm and helping people access that are going online, which is really good, rather than just in the casinos and things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. If you can bet and gamble just on your phone, like on your couch or in your bed without having to leave your house, that must make it so convenient.
Mm-hmm.
If you have, 5 minutes or 10 minutes here and there, and you already have all of it set up, I imagine for some people, why not?
Mm-hmm.
And I think during COVID, there wasn't as much of a social scene out there. People were really isolated. We know in our communities that was a big issue. And I imagine for some people that gambling was a form of connection.
Yeah.
Just in the same way that we turn on Instagram or we turn on Facebook, that they can turn on their gambling apps or their gambling websites and just, going to there, especially if they had, money that used to be spent elsewhere outside of those restriction times, that they now can funnel that into the online gambling scene. Wow. Can you tell us a little bit about the idea of incentives and the relationship between video games?
Yeah, absolutely. So with video games, outside of gambling, with video games, they have started to kind of look at there's similarities between being able to purchase like incentives or loot boxes or skins or things like that in video games, and gambling if you're purchasing those loot boxes with actual money. So they have been starting to look into that. There's a potential connection of increased risks with people and normalizing being able to go and then start to gamble online, as well as going in and putting money towards like things like bonuses and all those kinds of things. So they're definitely looking at that similarities between future gambling behavior for people and that are using video games and buying things with actual money on the video games, and then a link to that gambling. So it's something to be aware of. I think that it's a good conversation to have with people who are playing video games and just that education piece.
I remember when you first shared that with me after you came back from the conference, my mind was blown because some of my friends' kids started playing those types of games, like that farm animal game. I can't remember, or like, there's other games and it seems harmless, but it's using the same mechanisms of, the reward system, that when you buy something in that game, you get a little bit of that high or a little bit of a dopamine fix, and that can open up potential gates for a gambling addiction or
it gives people a favorable attitude towards not thinking that it might be harmful in the future.
Right. And that's like something that, I don't think many people think about or consider, especially because using technology and video games is so much more normalized than 20, 30 years ago even.
Absolutely.
Wow. So, it sounds a little bit bleak, like gambling addiction is terrible. Video games, have a risk. But what are some protective factors that people can start building in their lives to either safely play or just have a more kind of protection towards addictive behaviors.
Yeah, absolutely. So some like protective factors are really important in mitigating risks associated with gambling or problematic behaviors. So such things as protective factors are things a lot of times you will get in the community. So it's community connections or hobbies or attending groups that promote healthy activity and just friendships and all that kind of stuff. Some other protective factors are really talking to people around the harms that are associated with some of these things, especially with young people, because it can help with preventative work. Willingness to attend professional support is a protective factor, like just being able to be okay with that. Are some protective factors that are really important. So so just being able to access support, I think, is something that's really, really important, and talk to people. Yeah.
And so we do occasionally see people with gambling issues or gaming issues. What would be some recommended treatments that you'd work with a person?
Yeah, so it depends on, obviously, when we talked about stages of change in the last part, where they're at with it. A lot of people, so some people, if they're coming in, if they just want to reduce their use and not spend as much, we can talk about like limit setting and putting limit setting on and not attending casinos, having less access to money, those kinds of things. But there are different types of components of treatment outside of the clinic. So those could be Gambling Anonymous. So Gambling Anonymous, there's virtual site meetings as well as in-person meetings. So you can absolutely just Google about Gambling Anonymous and you'll get that information. You can definitely look at the helplines. There's virtual helplines as well as actually phoning, and you can specifically talk to someone. Accessing, if you are online gambling, accessing some of those tools and strategies that are put forward through like Play Alberta or whatever site you're on, and they can like limit the amount that you can spend. They can limit the hours that you can spend, as well as they can actually self-exclude you so that you can't gamble at all on any sites if you're wanting kind of a cool down period. So that's something that is important to know. As well as you can always talk to your family doctor. If you have a good relationship with them, you can be honest and look at the resources out there.
Just wanting to clarify, I thought it was really interesting, the idea of self-exclusion in casinos, that there's actually people you can go to start that process.
Yeah, you can just self-exclude yourself so that you're not allowed in the casino, and they'll kind of take all the advertising and all that kind of stuff away from you so that you can self-exclude and you can have a period of kind of processing and getting some support and help. So it's called self-exclusion, and that's something that people
you can talk to.
You can talk to about getting self-excluded. Yeah. Game Sense is some of the people that work out of Alberta that you can talk to if you're going to a Latin-based site for gambling.
Wow, thank you so much. I think, as I said before, gambling is such an evolving field, especially in mental health and addictions. And sometimes it's hard to keep up with all of these technological changes with the field. So that was really interesting. We're doing our best to support this need in the community as well. Tia is here. We have other addictions counselors. If you call Access Mental Health, whether it be for questions, for yourself, for friends or family, you may get connected with somebody here or with a different program. They'll do that screener and figure things out. I
also think it's important, sorry to cut you off, but there are treatment programs like groups and things like that. And then there is also an inpatient treatment program in Alberta that is specific for gambling as well. So it's not just that it's only outpatient counseling or like self-exclusion, but there's also other inpatient and other options.
And you can also access the walk-in service at the Okotoks Wellness Center, where we do have 7 days a week a crisis clinician, and they actually also see a lot of addictions-related concerns, gambling, gaming concerns. So there's kind of a whole spectrum of services that you can connect with depending on where you are and what you're looking for. I thought this was really helpful. Yeah. I hope other people find it helpful too.
Absolutely.
If you are wanting to give feedback, wanting to continue this conversation, please reach out to our clinic, to Access Mental Health. Thank you so much for joining us with these videos. We hope you found it helpful. And please take care of yourselves and your mental health and family and friends and community all around. Thank you.